Explosions tore through the Bloodfang, and it seemed to stagger in mid-air before plunging downward. Blair watched as Thrakkath fought to maintain control, saw the nose just start to come up as the prince managed one last masterful maneuver. But it was too late. The Bloodfang ploughed into the red-lit desert floor, erupting in fire and thunder. There were still several fighters above Blair, but they seemed stunned by the loss of their leader. He turned his fighter back towards the canyon and opened up his throttles. Perhaps there was just time to start his run before the Kilrathi recovered. He dropped down into the steep-sided, twisting gorge. It took all his skill to weave through that narrow gash in the desert. His HUD reeled off the range to the pre-programmed drop coordinates, and Blair's thumb grew tense, hovering over the switch that would release the Templar bomb from the belly of his fighter. A part of him recoiled from what he had to do. The destruction of an entire planet, warriors and civilians alike. Once he would never even have considered making this desperate gambler's last throw. What had led to this moment then? Was it just a thirst for vengeance? Thrakkath's death had left him feeling curiously empty of feeling, as if all his hate after Angel's death had been for nothing. It had been the same with Hobbs. In the end, revenge was a sterile thing. He could slaughter every Kilrathi here and in the farthest reaches of the Empire, and the killing would never change the facts. Angel and Cobra and Vaquero and all the others would still be dead, and his life would still be empty. He felt as if they were all there in his mind. Vagabond, Flint, even Maniac, who in the end had risen above their long rivalry and given his life so that Blair could finish the mission. But in the long run, he knew it was wrong to use that bomb in the name of those who had died. His range indicator continued to count down. Blair thought of the ones who hadn't died. Paladin and Ison, Admiral Tolwyn and his nephew, Rachel Coriolis, who had accepted the fact that he might never come back and still dared to love him. They were the ones who counted, and if the war went on, they would ultimately pay the same price as all the ones who had gone before. He pictured victory, broken and shattered as he had last seen Concordia. Imagined plague spreading across Terra as they had spread on Leconte 4. It was war to the knife with the Kilrathi. Kill or be killed. Not for revenge, not for hate, but for simple survival of the human species. He gritted his teeth and watched the range tick down. The target was coming up fast. It was now or never. His thumb stabbed down on the release, and as the bomb dropped away, he jerked hard back on the steering yoke and cut in his afterburners. The Excalibur climbed fast, the atmosphere screaming past as the fighter accelerated. The Vaktoth had followed him into the canyon and opened fire as Blair pulled up. The Kilrathi pilot followed, but at that moment the Templar bomb went off, and the shockwave threw the Imperial craft against the side of the narrow trench. The fireball was lost in the greater blast of the bomb. He had to wrestle with his own controls as the blast battered at his Excalibur. The rear shields failed, and Blair thought he could feel the impact of bits of debris against the tail section of the fighter. He had no way of telling how much damage he took, but the controls were feeling heavy and sluggish under his hands as he continued his steep climb, clawing for the safety of open space. Behind and below him, the force of the Templar bomb triggered a quake in one of the major fault lines. The effects spread and spread again, until the entire canyon was trembling with the force of a seismic event of unparalleled ferocity. Blair didn't see the effects of the bomb. It took time for the first quakes to trigger subsidiary effects, radiating outward through all the interconnected fault lines. The Excalibur had already reached orbit by the time the quakes became planet-wide, collapsing Kilrathi-made buildings and structures within the major quake zones. The Imperial Palace was one of the first to suffer, as the entire massive edifice caved in on itself, crushing the Emperor and his court before they had a chance to react to the violence consuming their world. The ground was heaving even in regions far from the fault lines now, as the pent-up energy of the entire world's tectonic stress was all released at once. Dust clouds rose into the atmosphere, huge rents opened up in the crust of the planet. As Blair finally cut his engines and looked down at the planet, it was to see Kilra disfigured by angry orange gashes spreading across the face of the globe. The Kilrathi homeworld was coming apart before his eyes. And then it happened. Overcome by the awful forces set free by the Templar bomb, the planet's core exploded, hurtling huge chunks of the mantle and crust outward. Vast planetoids tore through the orbital yards, smashing the assembled might of the Kilrathi Grand Fleet. Only a few ships, those under power unable to maneuver, escaped the death of the homeworld. Blair managed to steer clear of the largest of the debris, but his Excalibur was battered by smaller fragments. As Kilrath came apart, spreading out into a cloud of drifting asteroids, the fighter's engines finally failed. He was drifting free now, trapped in the doomed system. Christopher Blair sagged back in his acceleration couch, closing his eyes. He was exhausted, drained of anger and fear and hope alike. He knew he would die here, along with the planet and the empire his bomb had brought down. Barely conscious, Blair didn't see the Kilrathi carrier that edged through the whirling debris towards his drifting fighter. Tractor beams lanced out to seize the Excalibur and pull it down towards the flight deck. He realized, too late, that his death would not be as quick and easy as he had hoped. He would, after all, face the enemy one more time.